Hello, this is Dr. Adam J. Bach. We're going to continue our conversation about entrepreneurial opportunities by looking at the different motivations for forming new ventures. So from disciplined entrepreneurship, there are three specific motivations to start a venture: passion, technology, and idea. Passion is, I like doing something and I want to build a company about it. Technology is, I've developed something that can do something new, like a robot that can perform a new function. Or a general idea, I've come up with an idea that I think can change the world. So we're going to walk through these briefly to discuss the distinctions between them and some of the questions that you would want to ask to make sure that they're viable and attractive. We're going to begin by talking about the specific motivation of passion. So in entrepreneurship, passion is great, and it's almost always required. But generally speaking, alone, it's not enough. Entrepreneurship is a tough effort. Definitely, you have to be passionate about your idea because there are going to be difficult times. And as one of my colleagues used to say, when you get started in this business, you have to believe in yourself because at the very beginning, nobody else is going to believe you. But passion alone won't change a bad idea into a good idea. So we need to think then a little bit about the technology or the idea to make sure that they're going to be sufficient to support an attractive opportunity. So a technology, or sometimes we refer to it as a push venture, risks lack of market demand. Sometimes we come up with things, innovators come up with ideas that sound great, but they just don't solve a real problem. Great examples like the car boat. That technology has been around for a while. You probably don't see very many of them, and you've probably not thought about buying one. The Apple II computer was a great example, really interesting advance in technology, which, to be completely honest, was somewhat successful, but no one really actually needed. And then, of course, the ultimate classic example of a failed product launch is New Coke. Which is a story so old that you might not be familiar with it, but if you haven't read the story of New Coke, it's a great one to read. In each of these situations, the organization has to quickly find out that the idea doesn't work and pivot to a new market or find a way to create demand. Otherwise, like each of these ideas, they're ultimately going to fail. So, questions you should be asking is, what is the technology? How can I easily explain what this is and why it's beneficial? Does there exist a significant advantage over anyone else? And then, compared with what's current, why is the technology so compelling that it will make people and industries change? If you participated in the innovation marketplace or reviewed the innovation marketplace video, you saw that one of the key factors here is that it's hard for people to change their behavior. It's not just enough that the technology seems to be better than what's out there. If it requires people to change their behavior, or if it goes against existing standards, then the odds are against its success in the marketplace. So perhaps you have a large-scale idea. There's a specific problem you want to solve. We often call these pull ventures. These we generally suspect have more potential to them. Because they represent an established customer need already identified. In the case of Short Stack Eats, there were relatively few breakfast places on State Street in Madison, Wisconsin. And in fact, initially, Short Stack even had a business model where it was open all night for 4 nights in a row. That's changed. It now is just open very late and open early in the morning, but it's still providing a unique service in terms of offering breakfast, which isn't offered by very many other places right on State Street in Madison. Another good example, Tomotherapy, a UW-Madison spin-out company, which recognized that radiation therapy had certain problems with it and that there were certain types of cancers that couldn't be treated with existing radiation therapy. And so some scientists, specifically Paul Reckwart and some of his colleagues at UW-Madison, developed the tomotherapy technology and successfully commercialized it. The challenge, of course, is that you have an opportunity associated with a problem where there's not actually a solution. sometimes we get a little excited about ideas that we think can be solved, but the solution itself doesn't really work. So the whole idea around robot cleaners, certainly Roombas are a fascinating technology that's been very successful, but really all it can do is clean floors, and there are many limitations associated with how that technology works. An even better example, of course, is the common cold. We'd love to have a cure for the common cold, and there's been no shortage of individuals, some of them well qualified, some of them less qualified, providing what appear to be cures for the common cold, when in reality there is no definitive scientifically proven cure for the common cold. I am confident that if the cure that was in this book were accurate, we would all be aware of it by now, but my instinct is none of you have ever actually seen that book before. Sometimes, of course, you have a whole different problem, which is that there is a problem that needs to be solved, and we come up with a viable solution, but ultimately it's not, in fact, profitable. Great example of that here in Madison, Virent, which was a biofuels technology developed again at UW-Madison, and at the laboratory scale, the technology worked very well. Unfortunately, when the initial efforts were made to commercialize the technology, it turned out that there was no way to scale up the production process. Scaling it up induced a significant amount of additional costs, and it turned out that even if they could create the kinds of facilities that were required to produce biofuels with this technology, they couldn't be produced profitably. So key questions you want to ask with these types of opportunities: what's the problem you're trying to solve or the opportunity you hope to capitalize on? How urgent is it? Do customers really need this, or is it just something nice to have? And what will make you and what makes you and your team uniquely qualified to actually implement this particular idea? Sometimes you have a hybrid, and these are, of course, very interesting opportunities where you have identified a clear problem and there's a specific element of technology that's directly relevant. Good examples of these are probably companies like Uber or 23andMe. Uber solves a problem associated with personal transportation. 23andMe solves a problem associated with access to your own, to information about your own genetic makeup. And both of these employed technologies that had been developed but simply hadn't been put to this kind of use before. So Uber was applying peer-to-peer networking, and 23andMe was applying DNA technology that simply had never been used in a personal context. It had all been used commercially for research. If you do have an opportunity to generate a hybrid type of business, you do need to answer a couple of questions. Why is the idea relevant to a specific kind of market? What's the value that it brings to that specific market? In the context of Uber, of course, you're really talking about two markets. You're talking about both customers who need transportation and drivers who have extra time or are having or simply don't have a separate job. So sometimes you have to ask questions about multiple aspects of the opportunity. What is the enabling technology? And why wasn't this solution possible 5 years ago? Both Uber and 23andMe, good examples where the DNA testing technology was simply too expensive previously. And Uber, the sophistication of both the network technology and GPS tracking made it possible to set up these kinds of peer-to-peer networks, whereas previously it had simply been too complicated. And then again, you want to ask the question about why is it that your team is really ready to commercialize this technology. So hopefully this helps you see a little bit about some of the motivations for commercializing ideas and starting new ventures. And then we're going to, in the following presentations, we'll focus in on some additional aspects of what makes opportunities attractive.